There's already been a 7.1 offshore. There's already been a 6.8 within about 70 kilometers northeast of Tokyo, and a 6.3 100 kilometers to the east of Tokyo. So from the aftershocks, we're able to actually make some estimate of how big the initial patch of the fault was that broke, and it looks like it's about 140 kilometers wide and about 400 kilometers long. So, like I said, the biggest single earthquake in Japan history in at least 300 years. But in terms of forecasting aftershocks, you can't forecast the details of when or where they'll be, but you can figure that in the region of the big 400-kilometer long break, there will be many at the magnitude 5, 6, and maybe even at the 7+ level.
Okay, Professor, stay with us. We just have some information that's just come in, some breaking news we have. It's now confirmed that 8 people have died in this earthquake in Japan. The 8 people have died in 4 prefectures in the northern part of Japan. The earthquake, of course, striking off the coast in the northern part of Japan, about 125 kilometers off the coast. That breaking news we just received, 8 people are confirmed dead. We're talking to Professor Kerry See, Director of the Earth Observatory in Singapore. Professor See, we heard earlier on from the Japanese Prime Minister in which he was saying that the Japanese government has set up this disaster emergency center and that they will try to minimize damage and do everything possible. What can the Japanese government do to minimize damage at this stage?
Emergency response now is everything. Getting to people who are trapped under buildings, or people who are injured by the tsunami or by debris from the tsunami. So at this point, post-earthquake, post-tsunami, the most important thing is to have a very effective, very well-organized relief effort. And then also even issues of, electricity being off, fires catching, fires are reported, getting those taken care of as soon as possible so they don't spread. Recall that in 1923, during an 8.1 earthquake, or following an 8.1, almost all of Tokyo and Yokohama burnt to the ground, and most of the 140,000 people who died in the fire. So these emergency response efforts are going to be critical in the hours that come.
Okay, Professor, thanks for joining us there. Professor Kerry See, Director of the Earth Observatory of Singapore, talking to us there. Now, you're watching Al Jazeera's extended coverage of the powerful earthquake that struck off the coast of Japan. A reminder of the latest developments. The United States Geological Survey are saying it measured at 8.9 magnitude at a depth of 24 kilometers. That's regarded as a shallow depth where major damage can be expected. It was centered off the coast, 380 kilometers northeast of the Japanese capital, Tokyo, and there is now a tsunami warning in effect for Japan, Russia, and the Mariana Islands. A tsunami watch has been issued for Taiwan, the Philippines, and as far across the Pacific as the island of Guam. In the capital, Tokyo, a large building could be seen on fire and workers rushed into the streets. A 4-meter tsunami washed away cars and a bridge in Kamashi City. Japan's defense ministry has scrambled military aircraft to assess the damage. According to Japanese television, all public transport in the capital has been stopped. Rail passengers have been left to walk along the lines. The quake has sent tremors through the financial markets too. Japan's Nikkei closed down 1.7%, hitting a 5-week low. And Japan's top oil refiner has halted operations of 3 refineries in Sendai, Kaishima and Negishi. But one installation in Chiba is still ablaze. The country's earthquake monitoring department is advising anyone living near the coast to move to higher ground. Massive waves have already washed through some coastal areas. The U.S. Geological Survey says only 6 other earthquakes in recorded history have been more powerful than the one that has just hit Japan. The quake was felt as far away as the Chinese capital of Beijing. That tsunami warning is now in effect for 53 countries and territories. There are 8 people confirmed dead so far, and we're hearing reports of people missing. Of course, these figures are likely to rise given the devastating footage we've been seeing so far. An emergency disaster response team has been set up to respond to the earthquake. Japan's Prime Minister has made a public address on national television. He promised the government will do all it can to secure the country and minimize damage. He said some nuclear power stations have been closed down, but that there's been no reports of any kind of radiation leakage. He's calling on Japanese people to keep a watch on television and radio reports and to act calmly. Now, our correspondent Harry Fawcett is in Kuala Lumpur with the latest. He's monitoring events right down there. And Harry, what's the latest information you have in Kuala Lumpur?
Well, as you're saying, 8 people now reported dead. Some detail about 2 of those deaths. A 67-year-old man who was killed by a fallen wall in the Greater Tokyo area. An elderly woman also killed in the Greater Tokyo area. But as you're saying, these numbers are almost certain to rise. We've had one report of an inn collapsing in the northern city of Sendai. That is the main city, the capital of Miyagi Prefecture, the closest point really on the Japanese coast to the epicenter of the earthquake. As I say, an inn collapsing in that city, according to reports, with many people feared buried in the rubble. I can also give you a bit more detail about the situation with the nuclear power plants. The Prime Minister a few minutes ago saying that there'd be no reports of any leakages of any radioactivity emanating from those power plants. And what we do know is that 3 nuclear power stations have closed down automatically. The Onagawa plant in Miyagi Prefecture, again the closest area to the epicenter of the earthquake, and the Fukushima #1